Right. Good morning to everyone. Coming from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I'm going to focus to begin with on food and food production. As the entry point, we'll talk a little bit more at the end about the point of food production, which is about hunger. When you look at the BRICS, and with an eye on the clock this morning, you've got two big models. You've got Brazil and you've got China. Brazil, China, and India are comparable in many overall dimensions. They're all three in the top 10 global economies. As of last November, about 2 months ago, they were all running at over $1 trillion GDP. China obviously much larger, but Brazil and India fairly comparable in terms of growth in that GDP overall. China running annually at around 7%. India roughly now in the high 5-point-something, 6-7%. Brazil about 3%. And basically none of the other economies of over $1 trillion reached over 2.5% growth. So the point is, okay, lots of congratulations to everyone on that side. Let's think about food. All three countries grow enough calories to feed their populations, okay? The basic calories, which is mostly in the form of cereals. All three are growing enough. There may be a little export, there may be a little import. When we come to other parts of the food requirements like proteins and oils that are necessary to dissolve vitamins, then India certainly is not doing as well. But in terms of calories, India is definitely, and has been for a number of years, been growing enough cereals to feed itself. Now the styles of looking at these three, though, are quite different. I'm going to start with Brazil because it's an interesting model. Brazil, over a period of 20 years, put together what could be described as a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle of laws, of programs, and a fairly steadily increasing political commitment to eliminate hunger. And they've come pretty close to doing so. They have put together programs on access to food like school feeding programs, family grants, nutrition education. They have subsidized restaurants. They have community kitchens. All of those things operate as a matter of public policy in Brazil. In order to supply that, they've made a commitment to strengthen what they call family farming. That means smallholders. In India, you would say small plus marginal, which is about 83% of the farms in India. For a comparison, Brazil, as part of its architecture of zero hunger, insists that all of the access to food programs source their supply of foods locally. That means within 20 kilometers. So they are looking at local food security circuits. That means the foods are appropriate to the location. It means that small farmers have a chance to get good contracts and are able to look forward to better incomes. They have income guarantee programs, such as the NREGA in India. They have other kinds there, and they have a total control of the system through a supraministerial coordination system. All of this grew over 20 years to the point where, under the administration of President Lula in 2010, all of this was put together in a constitutional amendment. That means parliaments can't change it. It's a constitutional amendment that there be zero hunger in Brazil. And so the entire forces of the governments have to go in that direction. That's a very interesting model. I think that many of the elements are present in India. Of course, we have to remember that the total population of Brazil, the two GDPs of the two countries are the same, but the population of Brazil is about that of Uttar Pradesh. So you've got a different kind of scale to deal with, but very interesting. Now let's look at China. In 1988, basically 25 years ago, when I started working in the field in China, which was about 5 years after I had been working in the field in India, and have continued to work in both countries since then, China and India's road system was about the same. That was 25 years ago. China's farmers were, in many ways, seemed about as educated and accessed information like India's. The health of people in the countryside was roughly comparable. That was 25 years ago. None of that is the case today. Yes, there are problems in China with indigenous peoples, no question, as in India with tribal peoples. Otherwise, the roads have been built, kids are being educated, basic health is delivered. Those are fundamental commitments, not particularly put together in the same kind of democratic tradition that the Brazilians had to put theirs together, but they did it. And they are certainly growing more than enough food and exporting when they need to. China's questions, as the economy heats up as much as it did, are things like they now produce the largest share of the world's pesticides compared to any other country, and they export a lot of them. That's a problem, but they're also building up their pesticide regulatory system with young, educated, well-exposed people from inside in order that they can put that system under better management. Okay, in 30 seconds, what's the lesson? India's in the middle. India has done some of the things that Brazil has done, albeit it's in a larger scale. India's thought about and commits sometimes to some of the decisions that China did, but finds it very difficult to do so, in part because of democratic decision-making, but in part because of things like corruption and discrimination, which all of us know about. Don't have enough time at this point to go into details. But we think that India can go forward, not just on the area of production, but on making it sustainable. And in fact, if we compare with 20 years ago, India is growing about 40% more food grains than 20 years ago, and using about 35% less pesticide nationally. Now, India should be getting an environmental medal for that. It's something that isn't very well publicized around the world, but is something that actually happened through regulation and through shifting to integrated pest management on national scale. We need to put together more of that. We need to have a consistent leadership converging on that kind of solution for India to find a way to make the kinds of advances that both Brazil and China have made in their own ways, realistically starting from India's base. Thank you very much.